It's your boy, Just Dom, catching the day's latest news. What's going on around the roads? Find out here first at the TCP Newsbreak.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the TCP Newsbreak. It is me, Marquise Lupton, and today I have an amazing panel with me. We are going to be talking with a local group that is getting involved. So first and foremost, before we dive into the questions, Ken, let's begin with you. Who you are, a little bit of your background, and how'd you get involved?
Okay, thank you, Marquis. Yeah, my name's Ken. I live in northwest corner of Lancaster. I've lived here for about 16, 17 years, having lived in Mountjoy for most of my life, early adult life. I'm retired presently, and I'm part of a local neighborhood group of seniors that we get together rather regularly. And that's who I am. We'll tell you a little more about what we're planning in a bit, I think. I have a background in a number of things. I've been retired for about 6 years, and before that I was working in restorative justice for an organization that used to be called LAVORP, the Lancaster Area Victim Offender Reconciliation Program. It's now called ADVOS. This has been reconstituted in a slightly different format. So the local organization ADVOS, I'm still quite involved with, where we do restorative justice, community mediation, and I'm a board member and also do facilitation there. So that's a little bit my background.
Oh, all right. Well, awesome. Happy to have you. Mary, let's go to you. Hello, how you doing? And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Mary Kay Williams, and I also belong to the small neighborhood group that Ken referred to. My background was in education. I was a teacher and then a school administrator for about 30 years. And I've lived here in the northwest corner of Lancaster for 35 years, but I've actually lived in Lancaster City most of my life, since I was probably 12 years old. With a couple breaks, to go out west and try to find my fortune. But I have always been interested in a just society. And I have always, as an educator, tried to pass that on to my students. And then I retired and thought, hey, I might as well just relax and enjoy, cocktails in the backyard and snacks in the afternoon. And then all this stuff started happening, and it was like, okay, I guess not. I guess there's still stuff that has to be done. So.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to what you have to say during this conversation. Jim, you're next. Can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Be happy to. I'm 85 years old and fairly good health. Lived in DC much of my life until the 90s when I moved first to York and then to Lancaster about 15 years ago. I was quite active in local DC activities. I did go to the march in '63, very much involved with desegregation with Julius Hobson and others back in the 60s in DC. Have some criminal justice experience, taught GED at the jail in York for 6 years. An activist, and then came to Lancaster, and very much involved with the group that Ken and Mary Kay have talked about, and I'm very excited about continuing to march, if you will. So that's briefly where I am.
All right, and we are excited to have you. And certainly, last but not least, Lois, hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Marquise. I'm fine, thanks. Okay, again, I'm a member of the same group, very happily so. And I am retired from the last, 12, 15 years working in the field of poverty law. I've worked in Center City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and then more recently in Lancaster. you know, like the others have said, I've all my life had an interest in social justice and was a college student in the 1960s and was, you know, fairly active then. And I'm very much interested in the current movement. I just see a lot of positive things, even more so this go round than back in the 1960s. So I'm very hopeful. And I think it was Jim's suggestion that we old folks get out there and show our support. And I'm all for that. So I'm ready.
All right, all right. And we are ready to have this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, as you see, we have an amazing and remarkable panel with us today. So Ken, I'm going to begin with you. When you first contacted me, we briefly spoke about this event that is coming up on the 21st. So can you give a little pretense to the thought process of the event, and then can you let everyone know what the event is?
Sure. Actually, I think our idea came from one of our members, and I think it may have been Lois, who found a YouTube video that was done by a group in St. Petersburg, Florida, where there was a group, and they called themselves the Old Folks Are Rising, and did a little march along with a wonderful poem that was accumulated, that was accompanied the video. And we shared it among ourselves and we watched it. And after watching that, we said, you know what? That's us too. You know, we could do that. We could do something like that. So that was sort of sparked the idea for us. Our whole group, our whole neighborhood group has about 15 or 16 people. The four of us were appointed to work as a committee to work on this, some ideas and contact various persons. You know, we recognize that all of our neighborhood group, we're all white. But I think we've had numerous discussions together about the need to revisit the history of our own country, revisit even the history of our city and community, and have been sharing books and resources with each other and have been attempting to do some of that. So it's been a subject of how do we deal with the history of racism within our own country, past and present. We don't feel like we have lots of good answers, but we also, I should say, part of it was many of us sort of stood on the side when there were demonstrations were happening in the city, you know, some weeks back. But because of our age, because of our sense of vulnerability to this COVID disease, you know, most of us were not comfortable really being a part of that. So we said, you know, we could plan something that's going to be safe, but yet that shows that we are supportive. So that's sort of quick sort of summary of how we got to this point, and then began to put together the plans for we're calling it a peaceful sidewalk demonstration, Friday evening, August 21. We chose that date, being aware that I think there is a large national Black Lives Matter demonstration being planned in Washington, D.C. on the 28th, I think it is, or 27th or 28th. And we decided we don't want to compete with that date, but maybe a week ahead of time would be a good time just to sort of keep the subject in the front of people's minds. So our idea is to just line up along the streets, 6 feet apart with our masks on, holding our signs, a fairly quiet demonstration, but we don't know how many will come. We've shared it we have a larger network, our neighborhood group has a larger network of seniors that we shared this with. So, you know, somebody else can guess how many, maybe 30 or 40, 50, I don't know. We really are not preferring a large crowd because we want to be able to manage it and keep it safe physically. So that's our plan. And we'll be meeting at the gathering at the Rotary Park in the corner of West James, North Prince, and Harrisburg Pike. There's a little park there, and that'll be our gathering point, and then we'll spread out on the street on all directions.
All right, and Lois, this question is for you. Revisiting history, and learning from our past, so that we can plan and make change for the future. How important is it to revisit history, and learn from it?
Oh, I think it's extremely important. In all aspects. I mean, I was raised, all my schoolings that, you know, we learn from history, and if we ignore history, we ignore it at our own peril. So we need to revisit it. I've learned since the 1960s until today, I have learned so much more than I knew in the 1960s about racism, about what the daily lives of Blacks in our community were like, what they were having to deal with, much of which when I was, 18, 19 years old, I wasn't even aware of. Mm-hmm. So there's been it's a long learning curve over the years. And that's one of the reasons I'm hopeful about this time, in terms of the conversations I've already heard people having. Mm-hmm. And the interest, it seems broader to me than it might have been in the past. Mm-hmm.
Mary, during your intro, you said that you were a educator. How has that past and that experience help with your scope of what you see happening today?
Well, first of all, I'd like to reflect back on something Lois said about history. So I've always thought that it was really important. And growing up in the same period of time that she's talking about, I have learned since then, unfortunately, that all of what went on then, that wasn't the first time some of those things were addressed. In fact, almost everything that we thought needed to be addressed in the 60s had already been addressed right after the Civil War. But we were never taught that. That was not something we learned. So as an educator, but I taught young children. So teaching young children is a little different than teaching high school students. And I tried to introduce I taught at a private school. Most of my students were white. They certainly were not all white, but most of them were. And I tried to make sure that they, even as young children, were exposed to information at a level that a young child can understand. Now, of course, since then, I would say it depends on the young child. If the young child is living in a protected, safe, and well-fed environment, there are certain things they can handle. And if they're living in a dangerous, underfed, and not very well cared for environment, apparently they can handle a whole lot more. So I've learned a lot there. But I tried to expose those children to things from the past that weren't all pleasant. Mm-hmm. I tried to expose them to through song, actually. I did a unit of sort of starting with spirituals and working up through protest songs and the drinking gourd song and some other things. And then I would read children's stories about slavery or about Harriet Tubman, and then the protest movement, the civil rights movement. And I had so much hope when I was teaching young children, because what I observed in my young children that I was teaching was complete disbelief that anybody could ever be treated like that. Right. Complete outrage that anybody would ever be treated like that. Complete sense that there was nothing right about treating people of a different color or a different background. And we didn't just limit ourselves. We talked internationally too. We talked about cultures from all over the world. That was another part of our curriculum. And I was so hopeful because I had children who'd never heard the word nigger. Mm-hmm. They'd never heard this word. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a good thing. I thought that was great. I thought we'd made a whole lot of progress. Mm-hmm. And then, as Lois said, over the years, just realizing, not to say there's no progress. I would never say that, because I was here during Jim Crow. I saw that stuff happening. Mm-hmm. but not enough, just not enough. And what's been happening in the last, over the last 15, 20 years of the just different from one episode to another episode to another episode where you see the injustices going on based on race. And then you see this kind of venomous resurgence of white supremacy that we've seen over the last 4 years. I mean, it's enough to just sort of either knock you down on your heels or fire you up. So that's kind of where I am with it.
Absolutely. And Jim, with your background being in DC, where do you see DC going from here with rising racial tensions and more politicizing? Do you see DC revisiting history as is kind of the theme here, or kind of trailblazing new uncharted waters?
Well, I'm fairly optimistic about where we're going. I don't know what's going to happen on August 28th, but I can conceive of a nationwide uprising, if you will, not just old people. I remember back in the late 60s going to a march preparation. There were about 30 of us at Reverend Fauntleroy. I don't know if you know Reverend Fauntleroy. He was an aide to King. And we were arguing over techniques and nonviolence and all sorts of approaches and strategies. And this little woman, I kind of remember her name. She was like 5'1". She stood up on the table and she says, "I have organized something called Gray Panthers. Look it up." It was quite, at the time, a fairly well-organized national movement. And she went on to describe why we were working together and why maybe all our values weren't the same at one time, but we had one goal. That's all our strategies may not have been the same, but we had one goal. So the pacifists and the not violent people, but people willing to use more aggressive techniques, decided that for this march, we were going to work together. And I think that's where we are in a lot of ways, not just within our own group, but in Lancaster and elsewhere. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I'm reflecting back on.
All right, so we have about 3 minutes left here. So I'm going to have one more question for each of you. So we'll start with you, Ken, and just move on down the line. Ultimately, what the audience wants to know is why get involved now? Why not enjoy retirement? Why get involved now? We'll begin with you, Ken.
Well, I think all of us who have retired sometimes sort of go back and forth between we've done our good work through our careers. Now it's the time to take it easy. But I think most of us also recognize that's not really what we want, and we're often looking for ways to stay involved. And many of us are involved in a lot of volunteer work. But I think, yes, we'd like to challenge the seniors of Lancaster City to speak up and be heard. And that's sort of why we've planned this. And let me just add that, while I had said earlier, we'd like to keep the group small. We certainly welcome anybody to join us who really wants to do that. Especially, we would welcome some senior Black members of our community to join us. We would really enjoy that. So, if anyone gets that message and can join us on the 21st of August, 21st of August, we would welcome that.
Mm-hmm. Mary?
Well, like I said, I did all that work. I had all those hopes. I had all that optimism based on the way my students were responding. So I spent probably maybe 10 or 15 years in the middle of that time period listening to people complain about how bad things were still for our people of color and saying, no, you don't understand. A lot of progress has been made. No, you don't understand. You don't know what it was like. You don't know how bad it was. Progress has been made. And I feel like in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, I've just had that all turned on its head for me. And it's kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm not gonna walk back my whole progress thing, because stuff has changed, but not enough, not even close to enough. And I don't want to live in that kind of country. I don't want to live in a place where it's not liberty and justice for all, not just some. That's just it.
All right. Jim?
I think we, in the 60s, we're pushing on legal changes, and what we ended up not doing, our generation, sufficiently is organizational change and systemic change. And systemic is, of course, the new buzzword these days. And I think it's something that maybe seniors who've had this experience, black and white, can push on the systemic and permanent and big changes, both politically, economically, and financially, and not just the little things that we thought that we did succeed. They weren't little, but on hindsight, they were only the beginning. So, and we can't leave it to the young people. I think us oldsters have a role to play. So Mary Kay put it very well in our written statement, which I think perhaps she mailed it on to you. Anyway, that's available. That sort of summarizes what I'm talking about.
All right. And Lois?
I can say ditto to all of the foregoing. And also, I have been energized by, as I say, the tone of the conversation this go round. And I also have been inspired by things like the video and things like Al Sharpton's comments at George Floyd's funeral. The picture he painted of the knee on the neck just really, I still get the chills every time I think of it. So I'm not too old to be inspired and to want to get out there and do whatever I can.
Oh, all right. And we all appreciate that. And I appreciate you all joining me for this news break. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that is Old Folks Are Rising in Lancaster in support of Black Lives Matter. Sidewalk demonstration Friday, August 21st from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. This is on the corner of West James and North Prince and Harrisburg Pike. Bring your signs. So again, would like to thank you for joining us again. And we're going to get to Tea with Toy. Ladies and gentlemen, this was your TCP Newsbreak. Thank you for joining us.
It's your boy, Just Dom, catching the day's latest news. What's going on around the roads? Find out here first at the TCP Newsbreak.